Hey everyone, first of all, good evening and a warm welcome to this session. And welcome to this session building to build your open source eminence today, Node.js, where we will take you through open source principles, best practices, and much more. And what's more, we have also arranged a fun live quiz after this session for you guys. So you can participate in the open source quiz after this live, and whoever will win the quiz will be providing a one Swiggy coupon to them. And without any further delay, uh, I would like to introduce our speaker, Gireesh Punathil, who has prolific experience with open source, who is a member of Node.js Technical Steering Committee, and is a IBM Master Inventor. Hey Girish.
Hi, Karthik. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Warm welcome and very good evening to each one of you. Thank you for joining this talk. Really hoping to have a good interactive session. So, what is the motivation behind this talk? Building your open source eminence today with Node.js. Basically, the fact that more than three-fourths of the software development in today's world is happening in the open. And if you're not aware of that, or if you're aware of it and still not able to make your first move, or people who have good experience in the open source project but want to make the next step, what is a big step for your career and your eminence? I thought I will share my experience with the Node.js and show you some of the insights which will help you making your next step in the open source journey. So that's pretty much very precise the agenda is. And I just want to say that this is not a lecture series at all. I wish this could be a more interactive session. You can ask me any sort of questions with respect to Node.js and the community in general, and any other career related thing related to the open source. Any guidance, any insight that I can provide, I'm happy to do that at any point of the session. So please type your questions in the comment box. I will be able to access it through the tool, and I will occasionally look at that and try to provide you the answers. So that's pretty much wanted to cover. Thanks, Karthik, for the nice introduction. I've been with Node.js for the last 9 years. Started with porting Node.js onto IBM platforms, but then realized that it's a very prolific runtime platform, and it makes sense to look at other platforms, other architectures as well. And we bunch of people started maintaining the project from various angles and became a collaborator. Then later, with enabling some of the enterprise enabling capabilities on Node.js, such as the diagnostic report, security, and other aspects, I became a Node.js Technical Steering Committee member. So that's the journey, and that's the experience I want to share through some of these slides here. And I hope that will really be of some value to the audience. So basically, what we want to cover today is a small technical introduction about Node.js, what makes it unique, what is the value that it's providing to the technology and the industry, and what is the community behind the Node.js, which is more about the people who are running the show, and then some of the principles and best practices around open source participation in general and Node.js in particular, and then what are the things that we need to take care when we are looking at making solid contributions. What are the first steps that we can make today itself, in this evening itself? What are the small steps which will make your building block for a much more solid open source eminence and solid future, and some of the activities that we can look through the project itself. So that's pretty much the agenda. it's not very much rock solid. If anybody want to cover something else other than this, I'm more than happy to do so, because the whole idea, as I said, is to basically help you make your first move. It's not about the lecture stuff and other things. All right. So, technology at a glance. So, I don't want to spend too much time on the technology as such, but because it's a talk on Node.js, it's worthwhile to touch on what is the underpinning technology itself. But believe me, we'll spend more time on the community aspect of it and the best practices. So, Node.js is a server-side JavaScript runtime, which essentially means it's it's meant for programming in the JavaScript. JavaScript developers can write applications on this platform. It's a virtual machine, it's a language runtime, it's a platform. That means as an end user, you just need to worry about the JavaScript and the operating space in which your application will be running. What is an operating space? It could be a backend, it could be a desktop application, it could be a CLI, or it could be a gateway, proxy, whatever. These are the common use cases where Node.js is used. The reason why these specific use cases are picked up is the secret recipe of Node.js, that is highly concurrent workloads with high density of IO workloads. So that's the characteristic workload where Node.js is seen as performing in a super duper manner. In terms of the language, it is just built on top of the V8 JavaScript engine, which also powers the Chrome browser. That means there is no innovation or disruptive change that we brought into the language as such. So it's just the bare basic language. But the APIs, the asynchronous APIs, uh, that's built on top of the basic JavaScript semantics makes the Node.js highly concurrent and high performant. So the programming models which we have been hearing for the last many years, asynchronous means running out of the sequence. That means you make a call, then you forget it. The result will come at a later point in time, as and when the things get executed in a background sequence, which is out of sequence with your main thread of execution. That means you are free to do something else when the slow IO activity is in progress. Event driven essentially means your system is idle by default and it reacts to the events that are happening in the system. Kafka is the best example. Node.js is another best example. A web server, classical web server is a good use case or a good scenario to depict what is event driven systems. Web server doesn't do anything unless a users try to connect it, and then all the activities start. Once the response is sent back, the system goes back to idle. So classical picturization of event-driven architecture. Single-threaded. With these asynchronous and event-driven models are kept in place, the theory says you can do everything in single-threaded model where you have a lot of advantage in terms of resource optimization and you know better management of the scheduling and things like that. In terms of design goals, we try to achieve high scalability in dynamically changing workloads and with very less resource utilization and memory footprint where things matters. For example, the containerized workloads, what is the essential dream is to be able to shoot up as fast as possible from a container image, because you run with many replicas, you run with many failover systems and things. So you will have several replicas of the image and you want to boot up from the disk. So if the smaller the footprint, the better, the faster the startup, the better. And then simplicity, like you don't have so much monolithic complexity in the runtime. The Node.js binary itself is a single executable with no external dependencies, no shared libraries, and no other paraphernalia. So these are some technology aspects of Node.js at a very high level, 25,000 view. And with all these features in place, we can say that Node.js is one of the top runtime for the modern workload, which is the cloud and AI-based workloads. So that's the whole technology aspect I want to cover in today's meetup. The rest of the talk will fully focus on the people, the community, the process, the best practices, the socialization, collaboration, and other basic principles of open source development. So let's look at the Node.js community at a glance. Before that, let me switch the window and see if there are any questions. No? Yeah, good. So, what is Node.js community at a glance? Obviously, the community means the people. So, we have the top level governing body in the form of OpenJS Foundation. Earlier, it used to be the Linux Foundation, under which the Node.js had its own charter. And then later, many of the projects, open source projects that have the JavaScript as the common language, sharing between all these things, came under one umbrella called OpenJS Foundation. So this is the governing body. What is the requirement of a foundation? Because the open source projects are running in the open with no corporate uh, governance, it's so possible that the success and failure of the project is highly fluctuating and is a function of the people, technical people who are involved in the project. So there is if there is no management, if there is no cash flow or funding or necessary financial support and other resources support, etc., the project is susceptible for abrupt failures. So a foundation helps to sustain the development activities of an open source project for a long time. Technical Steering Committee is TSC is the top level technical body that governs, that provides the leadership for the Node.js project. Uh, we will expand on the TSC a little later. Collaborators is the project owners. That means they have the rights to the code of the project. They land in the pull request. They review the code from the contributors. They themselves contribute to the project, etc. They maintain the CI/CD infrastructure, the testing system, and other things. Working groups are special purpose to teams which are chartered with specific goals, and they act as a sub team within the whole of the Node.js collaborator space. We'll again touch base on working groups in a future slide. Contributors are anybody who provide code contributions or any other sort of assistance or help or contributions to the project. They don't necessarily be a collaborator. They can be a user, or they can be anybody who have a piece of code to contribute. Users are the end user of the Node.js. They themselves can be collaborators and contributors, but the large majority of the users do not contribute back to the project, but they consume Node for uh, their own development activities or their own business, commercial business. So this one is the top level view of the Node.js community. Each of these members, each of these groups interact between each other on a regular basis to make the community alive and to push the project forward to make the project one of the highly successful one in the open source world. All right. So, as I said, what are the working groups? Working groups are a small set of people who have a special interest in certain aspect of the project, because the project is quite huge. It's uh, as a person, I'm interested in the project, but not the whole of the system. I have a special area such as diagnostics, and I want to see what is Node.js diagnostic story, and how can I contribute? And I also want to know what is the latest art on that, and I want to follow that, or I want to replicate that in some other project which I own. I want to get some of the best practices. So all these reasons, you could join one of the working groups. You don't have to be a member, you don't have to be a collaborator or a leader, etc. You most probably you attend few meetings of these working groups, make some visible contributions, some reasonable contributions, and then you can apply for the membership in these working groups. I myself is part of diagnostic working group where in we discuss about the state of the tools that help in diagnosing production anomalies, and we continuously strive to improve the capability and usability of these tools. We also look at improving the documentation so that the consumption accessibility of the tools are better than the previous one. So that means it's not just writing C, C++ or JavaScript code, it's also about improving the consumability of these tools so that the end user has a good user experience at the end of the day. All right. So what is the role of the Node.js Technical Steering Committee? As I said, this is the top level technical body that provides the directions for the project. So, few of the responsibilities include providing technical directions, defining project process, uh, like the various processes in terms of building, um, running, testing, configuring API interfaces, and release cadence, and so many other things. Defining code of conduct. Code of conduct is one of the very important aspect, especially in an open source world. This is because we are a bunch of people who are collaborating for a common cause, but we are not bound by a single employer. We are not bound by a single country or an area of locality or anything else. So that means to say, um, it is it is possible that conflicts arise, or unsocial behavior arise, and uncomfortable situations arise. All sort of things can happen. So how do we handle such situations in the corporate world, in the closed source world? You definitely have some sort of rules governed by the company, and it's very easy to measure, very easy to use the yardstick to see is your behavior improper or proper. Whereas in the open source world, we don't have anything of that sort, because there is no single corporate company that is governing us. So that's where the code of conduct makes a lot of sense, and the project is pledged to abide by the code of conduct. And we have separate group of people who make sure that every member of the project is abiding by that. Nothing to panic on that, as long as you're sticking with the rules, which are very very simple and easy to relate. I mean, this is not stuff that we need to worry about on a daily basis. Defining the release cadence based on a number of constraints and rules. What is the best release cadence that meets the expectation of the industry, of the user base, as well as something meaningful in terms of the development that's happening in the project, is basically defined by the TSC. Defining quality standards, that means when something breaks, an API contract is broken, or as a set of tests are failing, and then what is the constraint or what is the rule that tells us that okay, this is probably not a big deal, and what is the calculated judgment and chance that we can take, or in other terms of no, this is a critical bug and we cannot release this binary with this failure in place. So it's something which we need to fix on an urgent basis. So all these kinds of calls are basically taken by the TSC, mediating technical conflicts which happen on a regular basis. People, essentially the collaborators or the TSC members themselves, will have differing viewpoints in terms of a piece of code. And I mean, it's quite natural if you have two people talking about something, there can be three different views. So, as long as there is a convergence, no problem. The collaborators are matured enough, they are responsible enough to discuss and sort it out by themselves. But what if, I mean, the standoff between two or more collaborators are not resulting in a convergence and it keeps going on? At some point in time, the TSC intervenes either by providing some insight to break the contradiction, or take it into themselves, debate within the technical steering committee, and then go for voting if that is required. Otherwise, provide the verdict, and that becomes the final word for the project for moving forward. All right. So at this point, before talking about the best practices, let's talk. Let's look at the project itself. I'm hoping that everybody can see the screen. So this is the Node.js project that we have been talking about. github.com/Node.js/Node. For those who are very fresher for the open source or the GitHub, Node.js is the organization, and /node is a specific repository. The organization is an umbrella container for a number of related projects, in which Node is one of those. We have 200 plus repositories under the Node.js umbrella. Don't be confused, or don't be scared by that number. Most of those are related to internationalization and other language locale support and things like that. In terms of uniqueness and discreteness, it would be maybe 30 to 40 unique projects that are running under the Node.js umbrella. So some of the things which I am directly involved, one is Node, which we call as core repo. Then the help, I call it as help repo, and the other one is diagnostic repo. Yeah, the diagnostics repo. So these are the three repos which I'm personally more involved in. So it doesn't necessarily need a person who is interested to register for all the repositories. So let's come back to the project, and let's look at the project in a glance. We have 1,300 open issues. We'll talk about that later. We have 300 plus pull requests. These are some of the indicators of how active the project is, or how many maintainers are there. Of course, by looking at the snapshot, you cannot say that. On a daily basis, what is the rate of change in these things would essentially say what is the velocity of the project looking like, etc. 2,000 plus people are watching this repo. That means if any activity happens, they will get a mail. 23,000 folks have forked this repo. Essentially means 23,000 people would have tried to build the Node.js from source. 86,000 people have started this repo. That means there are at least 86K people who have visited this repository, who have a stake in this project, or who has somehow tasted the benefit of this project. This is one of the top, I would say, top 10 project in the entire GitHub in terms of the activities. It was more than that some years ago, but I believe the activities, the involvement has slowed down a bit in the last 2 3 years. I would attribute it to the pandemic situation, but in terms of the number of stars, I would say it is still in the top level itself. But the underlying message is it's very active and it's very much used in the field. We have 200 plus releases. We have 3000 plus contributors who are actively contributing to the project. I wouldn't say every 3000 contributors are active on a specific day, but these are the numbers of people who have been making contributions to the project. The language, in terms of which are the languages that are used, the predominant language is JavaScript itself, because as I said, Node.js provides a JavaScript JavaScript application development platform. So that means it has to provide JavaScript APIs for the programmer to call. So the APIs, the Node.js as a whole is consumed by the user through the APIs, and these JavaScript APIs constitute around 60 plus of the 60 plus percentage of the entire code base. It's not necessarily only comprised of the APIs; it could be test cases as well, but predominantly we have JavaScript. We have some portion of the Node.js core written in C++ that interacts with other components in the platform, such as the JavaScript engine, virtual machine, and the event machine called libuv, which in itself is written in C. And we have Python, which is used to build the test harness. We have HTML for the documentation and the makefile and other things for building the platform. So why this is important? Because if you are wanting to make contributions, it's not necessary that you should know C or C++ or JavaScript. Based on your choice, based on your interest and skill, you can choose what is best suited for you and start making contributions. So just having a look at the project, README, providing a high-level introduction and defining some of the release types, showing where to download the binaries, showing where are the API documentation and instructions for building, instructions for contributing and participating in the working groups, and then the team members, technical steering committee, and the collaborators. So as you can see, the number of collaborators are quite huge. And triagers, we will come back to this triaging activity in a moment. That's pretty much from this page. All right, so let's look at some of the best practices. Okay, so now we covered the technical aspect of the project, we covered the people aspect of the project or the community aspect of the project. Now let's talk about some of the behavioral aspects. Okay. One of the questions that came to my mind when I embarked on the open source project 9 years ago was that, hey, what is the big deal around open source? It's just the way the code is organized. If you are in a closed source company, the code is hidden from the outside world. Only the binary is shipped to the customer. If it is open source, both the source as well as the binary both are shipped to the customer, or both are available out there in public. And that's the key difference. What else is the difference? Huh. I mean, why would a developer be worried more than anything on that front? But then, after working in the open source for quite some time, interacting with the people, I see the differences are much more than that. So that's what I wanted to share here. So the one subtle key aspect that we want to think about is the openness, remarkable openness with which the project moves. There is no hard assignments, no status updates, meaning nobody's going to assign you the work. You need to pull in the work based on what is suiting you, what is interesting you, and what is something which you can complete with confidence, etc. Nobody is going to ask you for a status. So clearly, you can see the contrasting characteristics with the uh, corporate or the closed source development, where these things are pretty happening on a daily basis. No Scrum meetings. That means there is no war room set up. There is no emergency discussions that's going on, no deadlines and no critical situations, because we haven't sold this license or sold this piece of code to anybody for a price, for a premium, which means nobody is going to hold us responsible. Nobody is going to call you for attending an emergency call. This is scary. This is interesting, but this might seem risky for certain people, depending on which part of the maturity curve or which part of the development style you belong to. But this has been seen, this has been proven as the most successful trait of the open source development. I can spend a 5 minutes on this to show what this means. I don't think the time will permit, but let's see. If I click on the issues, I can see that there is assignee label, assignee attribute, and you can see that there is no issue which is assigned to anybody, right? It is not easy to test for other attributes of the project, other attributes of the behavior. So I'm taking a very simple example of zlib deflate in a memory leak, which was opened somewhere in 2016 by somebody. And then somebody asking a question, some basic questions, and then somebody comes up with some studies around the behavior around memory leak, and finally makes a conclusion or an inference saying that by defining a custom allocator, this may be fixed, and there is a confirmation on the bug. But then that doesn't provide any solutions. Then somebody, this is not necessarily from the project itself, somebody seeing the issue had shared their opinion about they have seen similar symptoms, and the solution was to disable transparent huge pages. So they provided some insight, and then later somebody came back and said that that's not working. And then I don't know whether we should mention it here, but then suddenly there is a comment which says that did you read through this issue and the linked issue? If you did, then you probably know the answer. Then somebody is giving 11 people are giving thumbs downs to say that probably that was not an expected response to this issue. But then the discussion moves on. What remarkable thing that you can see here is that, I mean, people are sharing opinions, people are sharing insights. As long as there is a value to the discussion, those are good, and the discussion moves on. It doesn't get stuck to a single person. It doesn't get stuck without any solution. Each update, you are able to see some value that is being contributed. And the year has passed. We are in 2017, and somebody else came in and provided a different workaround in terms of disabling PHP, uh, and then somebody else coming in and provided another hypothesis, and that is being tested. And we are in 2018 now, still that's not working. Then somebody comes up with a statement saying that this is affecting the WebSocket module, and then it keeps going, and somebody else come with new thoughts, and it goes on. I don't think we need to cover the whole conversation, but at the end of the day, it is July 2020, and still the issue is there. It's not yet solved, but many inferences have been made, but the owners or the participants change, but it is not solved. It's definitely one of the toughest issue. I- the message I wanted to show is that the issue raised in the open source will not be fixed. That's not the message. The message is the way the people interact. That's what we wanted to highlight here. There is absolutely no need of providing a false promise or a deadline or a commitment and things like that. So uh, especially one of the message that I want to pass to some of the folks who are prone to providing commitments to, somebody else asking for status updates. Absolutely, open source doesn't do that way, and it won't work that way, because we don't have the end-to-end story around how the system works, and providing a commitment on something is going to be fixed is going to not work. So please keep that kind of subtleties in mind. I think let's move on. The other thing is transparency. Don't worry about mistakes. If you made a mistake, just state what you know. Nobody is compelling you, nobody's asking you to state all the things that they want to know. Just state what you actually know. You don't want to share everything. You don't want to study and answer things which you don't know. And be open to ask questions where you don't know something, and acknowledge something if somebody is providing an answer. Acknowledge in abundance. Be thankful to the insights that is shared by somebody. Clarify whenever required. If your message is not clear to somebody else, be open to provide clarifications and things like that. I have some suitable issues to show, but I think we will move on based on the timing. Collaboration, this is very important aspect. In a closed source world, based on an assignment, you will be working all alone. You will have access to your probably a peer or two, or a tech lead, or an architect, or a project manager, or a group of people who are sitting around you, or maybe somebody sitting remotely. So that will amount up to maybe 5 or 10. But in an open source world, the collaboration can potentially happen between hundreds of people, because hundreds of folks may be viewing your piece of work, and the most relevant folks who are related to that topic will may plunge in and provide their insight. That will make the development activities much more smoother and much more faster. So the key best practices are: don't try to build a full rocket, the most complex system by yourself, because that is going to either take a lot of time, and it might also fail because of lack of insight on various aspects. In today's world, the enterprise systems are so complex that one person cannot understand the end-to-end implications of a complex system. It can be security, it can be diagnostics, performance, scalability, and user experience, reliability, resilience. There are so many things, and after 20 years experience, I can honestly say that I don't have insight on all the aspect of a system. So definitely, it's impractical. So, put it out in the open, make a draft PR, state your intent, ask for support, and keep it going. People will start providing insights, people will start making comments and ask questions. If you have the answer, provide it, build on top of it, improve on it. And if somebody provides a substantial suggestion and contribution, make them the co-author of the PR. That way the collaboration will have full meaning and full scope of working in the open. Another thing is, if you have something in your mind and you're waiting for a very auspicious moment or some conditions to meet, that probably is not going to happen. If you have something, make a draft PR or open an issue and share that. It may be a question, or it may be a half-baked idea, and let it be. You can share that and state it. This is a half-baked idea. I myself don't have answers to these questions, but I am just placing it here. No harm, no question asked, or no eyebrows shown over there. Scaling the leadership roles, one of the most important aspect of today's talk. This is how we would scale. If you are already a open source contributor, or if you are not yet over there, this is how you would start by contributing. Start as a contributor. In Node.js space, you can start as a triager. I shown you the list of triagers who are there in the core repo. How does the triaging work is, just look at the issue backlog either in the Node core or in the help repo. Look at segregating the issues, or see if there is any first pass analysis that can be done. See if you can recreate the issue by yourself in your machine, or see if you are able to provide any recommendations based on your skill and understanding. If not, see if who is the right person who can handle this, or right team who can handle this, and then pass it on to that team, or label the issue appropriately. That's all the triaging work. So that's something which will help you kickstart your open source journey right today itself. The precondition for being a triager is to have some meaningful contributions to the repo. And if you are not yet there, please contact me. I'm happy to provide those work items to make you contribute today itself. Next level of contribution is issue resolutions. That will require some understanding about how Node.js works, what are the APIs, and what is the asynchronous event-driven architecture and things like that. If you already are there, you can start picking up issues. There are 1,300 issues. So PR is not the only way to help the project move forward. Helping resolving the issue itself is a good example of how can you get engaged. Participate in the working groups as a observer in the beginning, and then later as a participant. Contribute to the cause of those working groups. They will be happy to have you there. And then PRs. I put PRs, code contributions, at the end deliberately to emphasize and show the fact that PR contribution is not the only way, or not the way to contribute to open source projects. While these things will largely apply equally for any projects, the ones which I'm telling here is specific to Node.js. So by doing this, you become a contributor, and sustainably doing this, you will be nominated as a collaborator to the project with the right access to the repos, and you will continue doing your contributions. You will continue engaging in one or two working groups, though it's not a necessity. That is also encouraged. Be part of the code review process and help improve the quality of the code, and help maintaining the code in terms of landing PRs, in terms of helping fix the CI failures, and other aspects of the project. Then the next role is a solid collaborator who improves their visibility by making pretty much visible contributions across the board. And you are a known person among the community members. You are known to be social as well as professional in all the relationships. You make healthy conversations with people. You are proactive in doing certain things, and that way you make increased visibility. That's the point when you will be nominated to the leadership roles such as technical steering committee membership. At that point in time, you own the definition of the project. You will be leading from the front in terms of setting up the various attributes that we mentioned as the role of the TSC members, representing the project in external forums, evangelizing the project in forums such as these, and all these things come into the in the role of a leader in the project. So this is the gradual path towards eminence, and this is the recommended path forward, because this is, if you follow this approach, if you follow this sequence, it becomes more sustainable and robust. If you jump in an arbitrary manner, it might not be a sustainable approach. So please take a snapshot of this slide if you want. This is the most important the heart of this talk, I would say. How do you make solid contributions? These are some of the ways through which you can make contributions. Triaging issues, I already talked about. Issue resolution in the core repo, I showed you 1,300 issues. Pick up issue which is not yet worked upon by anybody and see if it's something which you can understand and provide some value, or take it up and see if it's something which you can start recreating. And the same thing applies for the help repo. Let me show you the help repo, not this. So, okay, I don't have the help repo here open. So this is the help repo. We have around 500 issues open, and it's all looking for voluntary folks who can provide help to the Node.js users. So I earnestly request people who have JavaScript and Node.js skills to come and visit the help repo and provide whatever contributions you can, whatever help you can provide will be much appreciated. I will be personally watching that repo and see who is making valuable contributions out there. The other thing is the node-todo.org. One of our leader in the community has kindly set up a website called node-todo.org, which is providing all set of guidance about how to get started with the project from scratch. If you haven't made any contributions to the project, no, don't worry about that. This link will provide you all what you wanted, including instructions for learning GitHub. And it also shows the number of contributions and commits that are made through this interface. So this is a highly successful initiative. Um, is something which you can do in a self-paced manner, or ask for help with the project folks, including me, if you want. This has been proven to be a successful thing, so don't. This will be one of the door for your entry to the project. And there are consistently failing test cases. There are always one or two CI tests that are failing. So based on your expertise and skills, that's something which is appreciated highly. And if you still are a expert Node.js developer, backend developer, and you understand all the asynchronous event-driven philosophy of Node.js, then contributing to the RFE is the way forward for you. There are 200 plus open RFEs at this point. How do you get there? Click on issues and feature request. Click on feature request label. So there are 226 open open feature requests which are waiting for either some sort of discussion to converge, but largely for developers to pick up and say on it. I would like to develop this feature, and then go ahead and implement that. So for expert seasoned Node.js developers, I would say this is one of the good way to jumpstart your journey in the Node.js world. So that's pretty much I want to cover. Quickly reiterating why should somebody contribute to Node.js? Six reasons I can talk about with confidence and my own experience. Top cloud runtime, one of the top cloud runtime. If you take any top cloud vendors, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Alibaba, or Oracle, you can say the top performing runtime is Node.js, one of the top GitHub project in terms of activities and velocity. High developer productivity comes in way of million plus reusable libraries in the npm world. That means 1 million plus software library essentially means you don't have to write anything, and all the business logic that you can think about in a reasonable application is out there in the npm library. You just need to figure out which code will do for this specific use case and install that in your application. So that increases your productivity exponentially. Full stack development in terms of the backend. If you're using Node.js for the backend, front end is mostly JavaScript. So there is an easy way for developers of an web application to talk to each other with the same resonance and frequency. High performance, I told you about in terms of the high concurrency model that is achieved through asynchronous event driven programming model. That is one of the reasons why it is picked up by most of the modern workloads. And then hot jobs, because of all these reasons, Node.js jobs are pretty hot. So if you are still hesitant, if you are not convinced on the previous stuff, these should be the provide you the impetus for embarking on the Node.js. So with that, these are the call for action. Whether Node.js or any other successful open source project, 80% of the project work development in the world is happening in the open. So take it very, very seriously. This is going to be the way forward. And then coming back to Node.js and JavaScript, JavaScript is the most popular programming language in the world at this point. They'll learn that it's a cool thing. If you are already a developer with some years of experience, JavaScript takes just half a day to learn, or maybe one day. Node.js is a little bit difficult with the APIs, but it's still doable very fast. And don't wait for an auspicious time. As I said, jumpstart today itself. Collaborate, be open, be transparent, be collaborative. I mean, be very much open to the discussions, be brutally honest, and that's one of the path to the open source eminence. And with that, I just want to once again thank you everybody for joining today's talk. I'm hoping that this has provided some insight for this contribution to the Node.js. And is if you have any sort of questions, please write to me either through the meetup or directly with this email ID that you can see here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Girish, am I audible?
Yes.
Uh, yeah, hey Girish, thank you for this informative session and taking us through this topic and letting us know how to build our open source eminence. It was
Thank
a wonderful session. So, if you guys have any questions for Girish, feel free to reach out to him. Uh, you can find his LinkedIn ID in the description of this YouTube video. So, you can reach out to him anytime you want and get your doubts cleared. And yeah, we were going to have a quiz post session, but there are no enough registrations for the quiz. That is why we'll be conducting this quiz in the next open source meetup. So, under the umbrella of open source, we have monthly events, and there'll be more events on open source uh, in this month and next month. So, stay tuned and keep following our meetup group for more events. So, thank you all for joining today evening. Thank you, Girish, once again. And that is all for today's session.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Karthik.